What's up, Sports Talk Detroit Pistons fan? We are still riding high right now. We're so excited after the draft. Troy Weaver worked his magic. We're talking Jaden Ivey. We're talking Jalen Duren. They're being introduced as I'm recording this video. But I want to talk about the one player that we haven't really talked about yet. In that trade for Jeremy Grant, the Detroit Pistons traded, or at least got to move up in the second round from pick 46 up to pick 36, where they selected Gabriele Procida. All right. Now, I looked this up. I found out how to pronounce this. But Procida, he's from Italian. He's from Italy, and he is a sharpshooter. So I'm going to tell you what to kind of expect this year and years going forward from this guy. This isn't your 40s and 50s pick. This is a guy that was picked 4 slots out of the first round. So I think your hope is that it's a 50-50 shot that he becomes a rotation player for you. And when you look at this roster and its makeup, this is the kind of guy that you need on your team when you are the Pistons. One thing the Pistons did in this draft was they got super athletic. So when you're looking at four of our young players, our young core, you're looking at Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Sadiq Bey, Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart. That's actually 5 players. Sorry. Even if you add Marvin Bagley in there, if you think we're going to bring him back, what is the one thing that you would say those 5 guys or 6 guys need more of? Shooting. Right now, Sadiq Bey is a great shooter. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But when you take them as a whole, the struggle is shooting. And that's where this guy absolutely comes into play. So when we look at this, as you know, I love Tankathon. I love how they do stat strengths and weaknesses and things like that. They make it really easy to read. So I want you guys to be able to take a look at this. And what you're seeing from him is that basically all of his shooting numbers are kind of through the roof. Really, really good. Now, he is a almost 6'8" shooting guard / small forward out of Italy. Como, Italy, and he plays in a professional league with a team based out of Italy. He's just turned 20 years old, and he was actually 27th on the big board here. But as you go down here and you look at these advanced stats right here, what you are going to find is that the true shooting percentage and the effective field goal percentage, the 3-point attempt rate, free throw attempt rate, all these things are in the green, and some of them are absolutely elite. When we took him, the first thing they said on the broadcast for ESPN was that this guy may be the best shooter out of the international grouping of players in the draft. And I completely agree with that. When I watch his film, and if you're going to Tankathon, right here is an awesome, awesome scouting report from him that gives positive and negative. But what I was reminded of, and I don't know how many of you will recognize this name, I saw a more athletic Nick Stauskas. Now, Nick Stauskas has hung around in the NBA. I know he was almost just out of the NBA, but he's hung around in the NBA really because he can shoot well. He has decent athleticism, decent size, decent handle. I think this guy has all those similar traits, but I see much better jumping ability from him and the ability to kind of finish around the basket. He goes with a little bit more authority. I also see that he is doing this shooting at a 38 to 39% clip in a professional league. This isn't college basketball. This obviously isn't high school basketball. This is grown men that he's playing with. And he's playing just over 15 minutes a night, which is pretty standard for a young guy in those leagues. But usually what you see from that is shooting numbers that really aren't that great. And he seems to have no problem shooting the 3 with authority. And that is exactly what we need on this team. When you have Ivy, when you have Duren, when you have Cade, you don't need a guy who's going to make plays for you. You need a guy who's going to stand in the corner and space the floor. It's really that simple, isn't it? And that's what we drafted. Now, what does it look like in the next year, 2 or 3? Immediately, what was said when the draft was going is this is a guy you probably draft and stash for 2 years. Now, that is somebody being paid to comment on the draft that I don't think really makes sense. If you're going to draft and stash him for 2 years, why would you take him in the second round? Like, I understand a stash for maybe a year, maybe, but if I were the Pistons, I'd be bringing him over. And I think there might be a roster spot, especially depending on what we do with our free agency money. Are we taking bad contracts? Do we have a couple more buyouts coming? Will we have roster spots open? Do we spend the bulk majority of that on a DeAndre Ayton or a Colin Sexton or a Miles Bridges? Like, this is a guy that can be a floor spacer that you can put in, and what you hope and what you know is that he's just going to get you some three balls. It's really that simple. So I don't necessarily view him as a draft and stash. And if you're not familiar with that term, is basically you draft a player from overseas and you allow him to continue to play overseas so that he doesn't affect your books as much, and he doesn't take a roster spot. So we look at that and it's like, okay, that could be helpful, but I think we also say to ourselves, like, all right, what does this look like? And nobody loves a second round pick more than Pistons fans. Nobody does. So I think it's always one of those things where you get a little bit leery when you draft a guy that's not from the United States and you haven't been able to see him play in a familiar setting. It's so hard for the average fan, for me, to an extent, for most people watching this, it's really hard to get an accurate depiction of athleticism, skill when they're playing overseas, because that's not basketball we regularly watch. I routinely watch college basketball. I routinely watch the NBA. And I think even to an extent, it's hard for us to grade a player based on what he does in the G League, because I don't think most of us routinely watch the G League. So when you have these players that are coming from other areas, it's hard. So there's always hesitation. But here's a number that doesn't lie, especially in professional basketball. He was shooting the three at a very high clip on a professional team in Europe. That is a good thing and an absolute translatable skill. It's a translatable skill. Now, what are the negatives on this guy? Well, negatives are he's not great at passing. He's not great at passing. He has a wingspan that's almost exact to his height, so he doesn't have a huge wingspan. And his assist to turnover ratio, I believe, are like almost 1-to-1. In fact, they're a little bit under 1-to-1. He averages more turnovers than assists. The good news on this is he has a good steal rate per 36 minutes. So he's good at getting into passing lanes and doing things like that. So if he's a guy that has the ability to play some decent defense, has good size, decent length, and can shoot the three, he's a guy you can find 10, 15 minutes and carve that out as a shooter at this next level, at the NBA level. So I'm actually pretty intrigued by this pick. I like it. And as we were going to pick, I mean, the ones that we were talking about at 46, the Max Christie's of the world from Michigan State, the Caleb Houstons, guys that are more of what we're familiar with, that actually, are similar size and stature to this guy, they were already off the board. And by the way, their stats don't even touch this guy's stats. And I would say that he's a better athlete than Caleb Houston. Not than Christie, though. He was not a better athlete than Christie. So yeah, I think this was a good pick at 36. I think it was a good value, and I'm really excited to see what kind of floor spacing he provides when we see him in Summer League here in a few weeks, if he plays in Summer League. And then going forward, if he's a guy that makes the roster this year or the following year, I hope he doesn't just disappear like Dervitas Servitas, but he seems to have a much better athletic profile than him. And so I have a little bit more confidence that he'll stick. I will also say this before we end the video: would like to see him just get a little bit thicker. There's different heights and weights that he's listed at. I've seen him listed all the way from 6'6" to 6'8", and I've seen him listed all the way from 193 to 215. So depending on where he comes in also would really do a lot to help determine, okay, what is this guy? What can he bring? If he's playing with the athleticism he's playing with at closer to 215, that could be a much more immediate impact than at 193. So let me know what you think about this one. I know we're excited about draft night, but we got to talk about our second round pick too. Come on, guys. We got 3 players in this draft. Troy Weaver does it again. I think he absolutely nailed it in the second round for this pick. But what do I know, right? It's a second round pick. I've watched 15 minutes of film on the guy, but I do like what it is. If you understand what his role is going to be, 10 to 15 minutes off the bench, that's the end. Like, he's a back end of your rotation guy. And that's what you're hoping for at pick 36. So let us know your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you.